Welcome to Circuosity. I'm your podcast host, Jim Strader-Sasser. It's nice to have you here today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about pain, suffering, compassion, and how that takes place within the circles of our personal and communal lives. So, let's begin. Actress Linda Thompson is quoted as saying, "Our uniqueness, our individuality, and our life experience molds us into fascinating beings. I hope we can embrace that. I pray we may all challenge ourselves to delve into the deepest resources of our hearts, to cultivate an atmosphere of understanding, acceptance, tolerance, and compassion. We are all in this life together." I'm curious about the circle way because I understand that circles offer a different way of being and living into our lives. Many of us, myself included, think of our lives as being a straight line and going from point A to point B, or going from the age of 50 to the age of 60. And one of the realities of life, as the great Buddha knew and taught, is that suffering is a part of our life. It is inexplicably, yet perhaps perfectly well understood, that if you are going to live, you are going to suffer. Part of it is just simply because we are born and we die, and the world that we live in is chaotic and also dynamic. And as much as we would like, we do not control everything around us. So the Buddha provided his followers the Eightfold Path and a means for discerning contemplatively and intellectually how to train oneself to accept suffering as being true and how to overcome the pain associated with it. We think that pain is sort of centered in our brains and that our brains are handling it as best as they can, when in reality, the way that our brains understand pain is through a series of networks and through a series of relays, if you will. And so when we stub our toe or break our ankle or encounter our back pain again, our brains have a particular way of understanding it, and to some degree that's based upon our genes and other cultural factors. But more often than not, the pain that we feel is an oversensitivity to what is happening and an overreactive nature of our brain to the problem that is at hand. And so while we may want to medicate, perhaps our best solution is to have compassion and to take things more gently with ourselves so as to allow healing to occur. If we are to accept Linda Thompson's challenge and delve into the deepest resources of our hearts, then we must be honest with ourselves about a few things about who we are as a human being. First, our brains are still evolving. They are by no means perfect. It is still very likely that on some conscious or subconscious level, we are afraid that there may be a saber-toothed tiger around the corner, or that some angry God is going to smite us if we don't behave correctly. So we tend to make a lot of decisions rather compulsively and rather emotionally. One of the first things I think we should do when we are experiencing suffering or pain is to assess the situation, especially if we're dealing with a psychological trauma, and say, is it true? Is what I'm experiencing as radically awful as I believe it to be? And also to accept that challenging ourselves to do better or to run faster or to be younger or whatever our brains and our egos want us to do is also most likely not the best response. Faith, hope, and love in the Christian tradition are the three greatest virtues. They're followed by other things like prudence and patience and wisdom. So, within the circle of our own lives, I would encourage us all to consider when we are encountering suffering, perhaps that we brought upon ourselves or that someone else is imposing upon us, or an unjust system is causing us and thousands of other people to suffer, is to determine how urgent and important it is and what are some logical and not so emotional steps that we can take. Human beings can go to the other extreme too. If we don't want to confront a problem or otherwise correct a behavior or somehow improve our lives because of some psychological or physical trauma in the past, we start to come up with a whole bunch of reasons to lie, defer, deny, debate, or just otherwise completely avoid confronting what's happening in our lives. I happen to like a blog done by Mark and Angel, which is called Hacking Life, and they recently offered some solutions for 20 tiny thoughts that are crushing our brains. And you may be familiar with some of these, like, my dreams and goals can wait, I'm not talented enough, they don't like me, the problem is too big to solve, I knew I wasn't good enough, why can't everything be easy? Other people have it easier than me, and so on, and so on, and so on. More often than not, it's my experience that people let a problem fester until it's just so great that they can't avoid taking action on it anymore. And now, because they have complicated it to the point that it's reached, that it is now a much more difficult problem to solve than if it had been addressed earlier on. So, one of the recommendations that Mark and Angel offer is again to say, is this true? And oh, by the way, is what I'm thinking about myself or acting about with myself the best way to be handling this problem? Am I being realistic? Am I being honest? And can I change the way that I pray, the way that I think, the way that I believe, so as to live a more abundant and flourishing life? Here's where resources like the Episcopal Church's Way of Love and the Circle Way's understanding of listening attentively and speaking intentionally and striving for well-being can be really helpful. The Way of Love teaches us to undertake a discipline of prayer. to strive to bless ourselves as well as to bless other people so that God provides God's blessings to us, to rest when we need to rest, to learn what we need to learn, and to dedicate ourselves to the process of indeed delving into the deepest regions of our hearts, which is where I believe we find God. Each and every one of us has a purpose for being here. I can't say what your purpose is, and you probably can't tell me what mine is without knowing something about me. But if we are striving to do our very best to be the person that we are on this planet to be, and we have a really honest, wise, and compassionate understanding of ourselves, then we bring those gifts to the communities that we live in, to our families, to our neighborhoods, to our churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples. And this is how we can improve our lives, I think, because people who have taken the time and energy to consider how they are well and unwell, a truly holistic, realistic sense of who they are that comes from the gut of compassion and kindness coupled with faith, hope, and belief, certainly provides a strong circle that is dynamic and capable of surviving in the chaotic times in which we live. Our uniqueness, our individuality, and our life experience molds us into fascinating beings. I hope we can embrace that. I pray we may all challenge ourselves to delve into the deepest resources of our hearts, to cultivate an atmosphere of understanding, accepting, tolerance, and compassion. We are all in this together. Thank you for listening today. Until next time, may God's holy, healing, and enabling spirit be with you every step of the way, and be your guide, companion, and friend as your path twists and turns. And the blessing of God Almighty, Creator, Redeemer, Giver, and Sustainer of life, be with you today and remain with you always. If you love this podcast, please follow us on Facebook or Twitter or at circuosity.podbean.com. Please be so kind as to share these resources with your friends. And I'll look forward to talking with you and hearing from you in the coming week. Blessings along the way. Bye-bye.